Hi, and welcome to Your Inside Power. My name is Patricia Stepper. I am the show host for this Win-Win Women TV show. Today, we have a very special guest, Sheyenne Kreamer, and she is coming to us, well, today from Florida, but that's not where she just travels all over the place. So we're going to be talking about how teams can work really well together and how to build that collaboration. And then we're also going to spend a little bit of time talking about education and what we can do for other children to help build their self-esteem, help build their image, and get them moving on to successful adults. So, Sheyenne, thank you so much for coming and joining us today.
Thank you, Patricia. I am so honored and happy to be here.
So tell us a little bit more about what you do and how you work with teams.
Oh my goodness. Well, on the big picture side of things, I am all about, I tell people to think of us as kind of a virtual consulting company where we're bringing together independent consultants who can work together in collaboration teams and be able to create new solutions that are needed to help improve our education system, improve businesses, and improve our communities. So that's kind of the big picture of who we are and what we do. We're all about putting heart and soul back into education, business, and communities because we feel like there's just too much that has been separating us from who we really are meant to be. So that's the big picture. The smaller picture, where you and I have kind of connected, is much more about a pre-apprenticeship program that we're creating. And it's based on a program that we did a few years back with a group of teenagers. These were teenagers that, quite honestly, most of them had already been kind of kicked to the curb and kind of told that they probably would never amount to anything. We had kids who were on probation. We had kids who were dropping out of high school. We had kids who were in foster care and just not feeling, like they were really connected to a family. So these were all kids that were having some challenges, and they weren't sure about us when we first came together with them. But they're the ones who helped us to develop the apprenticeship program that we're creating, or pre-apprenticeship program we're creating now, because by the end of the program, they had created their own basketball tournament, their own community cookout, and their own flea market. And they did all the work for it, and they took home the money they made.
So that's very exciting. And, you mentioned a couple things there, talking about they don't really know who they are. And that's one of my big things. And when we talk about using your inside power, since it's the name of my show, we have to dig deep into who we are. And we don't realize the enormous good that we have inside of us if we just learn how to release it. So I know one of my very soft spots in my heart is about children, having been an educator for 32 years. And, I really feel that there's so much need out there for children and for who they can become, but most of them have no clue and don't have that support. So what do you see in the youth that you work with?
Oh my goodness. One of the real sad things that I've seen, and this goes all the way back to me when I graduated high school, because even though I was top of my class, I didn't feel ready to go to college. And everybody was, like horrified that I'm like, no, I actually want to do something where I can experience some things first and get to know more about myself before I make a definite jump into the college system. And that's what I did. I ended up being in a 3-year manufacturing apprentice program where I learned manufacturing from the ground up. I was cutting metal chips, folks. And it was a great experience because I got to learn so many things about that operation that when I finally did go to college, first of all, the company paid for it for me. And second of all, I had a much better idea of what I wanted to study. And that's the challenge I see with a lot of our young people today. In fact, even this past September, we went into a high school in North Carolina, and we sat during a lunch period with a bunch of teenagers and just, question them, trying to find out what were they thinking about. And a third of them was like, yep, after this, I'm going on to college. About a third of them said, I don't think I want to go to college. I want to start my own business. And then a third of them were, I have no idea what to do.
I remember, of course, when I was teaching, now this is in the elementary level, kindergarten through fifth grade.
Mhm.
And we're trying to, the mantra was, every kid must go to college. And I'll never forget overhearing one of my colleagues say to a group of fifth graders, you will never amount to anything if you don't go to college. And I was just so upset when I overheard that conversation. And so when I got those kids in my room, I was like, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? And it's okay. And, there were kids that were absolutely afraid to tell me that they didn't want to go to college, probably from hearing that spoken to them. And I'm like, it's okay. You don't have to go to college. College isn't for everyone. And good thing, because we have lots of different occupations and things that people need to do, and they don't always require college education. And then you have that child that's maybe from foster care or from a poverty-stricken home. That's the furthest thing from their minds.
Exactly.
So I think it's great that you're trying to help them just find themselves and find what they really love to do.
Exactly. And here's another surprising thing that most people probably haven't thought of, is that when we worked with that first group of teens that was in such challenging situations, the very first question we asked those kids was, if you had a closet full of money that was never going to run out, what would you be doing with your time? And remember, these were a lot of kids who'd already been kind of kicked to the curb, were already having some serious challenges in their lives. Almost every single one of those teenagers wrote out something about, I want to help other people.
Wow. That's very impressive.
It was not only impressive, for us, it was shocking. We're like,
Yes.
Really? Tell us about that. And, what we ended up finding out through time was that it's kind of like someone you described earlier to me, the challenges that they've been through, they want to help ease the pain of other people going through them. That's what it comes down to. We even had a group of students that I worked with in a high school several years ago. And this was an entrepreneurship class being taught by the basketball coach. And he was a wonderful man, but he knew nothing about entrepreneurship. And so I volunteered every Friday for a whole semester. And I brought in a business plan writing competition for those teens. And they decided to divide themselves up into 6 different teams. And 4 of them were pretty standard business kinds of stuff they were talking about. There was a tech business, there was a coffee shop, there was those kinds of things. But there were 2 groups out of those teams that, again, kind of blew my mind, because one of them was a group of young men, and you could tell they were pretty much into athletics. They were wanting to create a new kind of group home for boys.
Wow.
There was a group of young ladies who their project was all about creating a new domestic violence shelter for Hispanic women. These kids were talking out of their experience and trying to make things improved based on where they've been. And yet, how often do we ever ask our young people for their ideas on anything?
Yeah. And, they probably had some very creative ideas as to what to do because of their experiences.
Exactly.
And how often do bureaucrats or older adults think they know all the answers, and here are these people that have the experience. Experience teaches so much, good or bad.
Yes.
And, it can help us to decide, what it is that we need to do to help others and to move forward.
Exactly. So, yeah, I think a lot of our young people know a lot more about where they want to go in life. The challenge that we have is that there are not proper support structures to help them do it.
Yes, you're right. So how do you think we can go about supporting ideas like this?
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm sure I know because I know some about your background. You know the power of a mastermind, right?
Yes.
And so that's really what I'm encouraging and what our consulting companies, because we actually have two of them, our consulting companies are really about that. It's about bringing together small business owners who are problem solvers. We have to be problem solvers or we'll go out of business. So, bringing together these groups of small business owners who have like values, like vision, like mind, and in most cases, like passion, and getting them to think about and brainstorm about how can we come together and plug some of these gaps that are out here, creating a solution through our knowledge base, our products and services, and be able to create a bigger solution together than what any of us can do by ourselves. That's where I believe that a lot of business is going to start happening over the next few years because there's so much to be said that we is always stronger and more powerful than me. And, it's been a challenge to get small business owners to think in terms of, oh, you mean we could actually be like a consulting team and we could market ourselves as a team. And oh my goodness, we could create our own collaborative products or services that we could go out here and market. I mean, that to me is where the power really is, because that first group of teens that we served, where we got them doing their own basketball tournament and cookout and flea market, it was a small group of small business owners who came together and put that together. And, I know we changed the lives of those teens. They came away with a different level of confidence and capability than they ever knew existed.
Cheyenne, that is one of the things I was just talking with a couple people yesterday and today about that very thing. How we can collaborate because not one person knows everything.
Right.
And so we need the power of other people to help us to get those ideas out. And, one of the things I work with my clients is on building those big dreams and goals, because when you have something really big that you want to do, that's where it's exciting.
Yes.
Things that we know how to do, that doesn't excite us to set for goal. But when we have something that we don't have any idea how to do, that's when we get really excited. And it's the figuring out how to do that. And that's where we really have to go in and use those inside powers that we talk about and get those ideas flowing. And then when you communicate with others who are doing that same thing, you become unstoppable.
Exactly. The most wonderful creations come out of that group thinking and group mind that is created when, especially if there's like passions in the group. We had a group several years ago back in Raleigh where we were working with a nonprofit who wanted to teach health and wellness empowerment to her community. And so we started doing these weekly programs at her facility where we would bring all together all these folks who were interested in helping the community learn more about how to be more wellness empowered. And one night we ended up with a room with about 40 people in the room. And I had some folks that I knew were good group facilitators. And so we divided up the room and I put them in charge of those groups to facilitate. And it was so cool because by the end of the night, we had a room full of people where we had a team who wanted to work on women's issues, a team that wanted to work on youth issues, a team that wanted to work on seniors issues. It was just so cool because people were finding each other based on what they were passionate about. And that's when it gets really cool because, when you take that passion all together, it lights a fire that you can't stop.
It does. It really does. So how do you find it best to pull people together to make a collaborative team? What are some of the steps you go through?
Oh, goodness. It's become quite a challenge because, again, my first attempt several years ago at putting together a collaboration, back in Raleigh ended up being more like a cat fight. And it was like, oh my goodness, just because they had similar visions didn't necessarily mean that they were willing to collaborate. They all liked the idea in their minds because they knew that they each had a vision that was so big that it was going to be difficult to get it done by themselves. But getting them to come together and figure out how to collaborate on that was like, oh my God. So, I used to be a recruiter, so I have quite an interview process these days, and most people don't even know that's what I'm doing, because I love to ask questions anyway when I'm out networking and meeting new people. If I go into a room full of people in a live networking event, the first question I ask to try to determine whether I want to spend time talking to that person or not is the same question you heard a few minutes ago. If you had a closet full of money that was never going to run out, what would you be doing with your time? If they tell me playing more golf or, watching more sports or something of that nature, that's not the kind of group I'm looking for. I'm looking for the people who have a vision, who have a desire to make a difference, even if they don't know what that difference is. If they know there's something more they want to be doing in the world, then I will spend more time, asking a lot of questions and just trying to get a sense of, has this person ever worked in a team before? Are they familiar with the team problem solving processes like what I learned in corporate America? Are they somebody who, can in a team setting can give input, but then also be quiet and listen, because you don't want people who are going to take over a group either. So that's the kind of stuff that I look for. And, I usually tell people a little bit of some of our story and see how they react to it. If they just kind of go, oh, that's nice, and then they jump off into telling me more about themselves, well, I'm not resonating with them. And that, you can, because of this whole inner power thing, people that it's a good idea for you to be working with, you do kind of resonate with each other. You do start to find that common ground where you go, all right, this feels like somebody I could work with. So that's the kind of stuff that we go through. And that's why I do so much networking, because it's probably only 1 out of 10 or 20 that I get the feeling as people that I could actually work with.
Wow, that's it.
Yep.
Interesting. So when you're talking about, resonating with people, that's what I like to call being on the same frequency.
Yeah.
And there's all these different frequencies, but we're not on, we're on one, and we tend to attract the kind of person that we need on that frequency. So you can tell very quickly if somebody's not really resonating or in harmony with your idea. And it might not be that they'll never be there, but at that moment in time, they're not there.
Right.
And
right.
sometimes we wonder, how can sometimes we might think they're shallow or something. How can they be so shallow that they don't see the bigger picture? They're not there yet. They haven't gotten to that level, and they just haven't reached it. But there's always hope for people, right?
Oh yeah, we're all on a growth curve,
Yes,
right?
we are.
And people change, and that's why I try to. We were talking earlier about kind of keeping track of our networking and stuff. I try to keep track of who I've talked to, because I will go back at a later time and just see, okay, I remember there was this thing they did that I really liked, and maybe it fits in one of our teams, but maybe they're ready now. And there's some people I've been going back to for a lot of years, and they're still not quite ready.
Yes. I don't know if you ever heard of Charlie Tremendous Jones. He was a speaker, and he lived not far from me. And I remember hearing him speak on many occasions, and he would say, you're the same today as you will be tomorrow, except for the people you meet and the books you read. He was really big on reading books. And, people you meet was not just in person, but people that you maybe heard on a tape or heard on a CD, or, the experiences. And, I think, for some of the people we're talking about, they've had experiences in their lives, and, they've hurt from those experiences, and they've been a painful experience. So how can they help shed light on somebody else that may be in that same spot and could use that assistance. And maybe they've gone through that growth curve and now they feel they have something to offer.
Absolutely. And it's so true. I mean, even that disaster that I was involved in, I understood. I wasn't upset with anybody. I was just like, well, this is not the right place to be for what I'm doing. But, but I understood that every single person who was in that room, most of them had already created their own nonprofit organization. And why was that? Because they had come through something painful and they were trying to pay it forward to help somebody else. And in those cases, I get it. You want to maintain some kind of control over that because you want it to be representative of who you are and what you're about. So I'm not here to argue or fight with anybody about anything like that. Again, there's a growth curve. And at some point in time, some of those folks may go, you know what, maybe if I let go of a little control here, know where the things are that I need to hold on to as a stake in my business, but maybe let go of a little and see who can help relieve some of that burden off for me. Because that's the other thing. People who are out here being the lone wolves oftentimes feel like, oh my God, I'm pushing boulders uphill. I don't know how long I can keep doing this. And the good news is you can choose something different.
Mm-hmm. And maybe find other people to collaborate with.
Exactly.
And build those teams where you're not having to do everything yourself.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I met this girl. I was mentioning this to you before we started the show, that young lady who had been in foster care. And so she wants to have a charity where she's helping other people. And when I met her, I was just so amazed because she was young. She was a young lady. Mm-hmm. And, she wanted to do something immediately for, other people in foster care. Yeah. And I remember saying to her, I can't relate to your experience, right? But I can feel your pain. And, I think that's what we're looking at. We can't relate to everybody's experiences because we haven't all gone through the same things, but we can feel people's pain and their need for wanting to help others.
Exactly. And doing that whole thing of helping others is such a wonderful way to help ourselves heal. I mean, I know that for a fact. I've been through a few challenges, and absolutely every time that I could figure out how to help somebody else with something similar, it is a beautiful healing tool for ourselves. So it sounds like she's very much in the same space as those teens that we first worked with. But here's one other thing that comes to my mind too, is part of what I'm trying to educate people about these days is that nonprofit is not the only way to help people, because and who knows where the economy is going, but every time our economy takes a nosedive, it gets a whole lot harder to find the donors, to find the grant money, because the competition becomes stiffer and the money gets tighter, and all of those things happen. So a lot of what I try to educate people on is the whole idea of social entrepreneurship, which is, from my perspective, having for-profit business that also has a social impact mission. And you can do that in so many ways. I mean, I know you're considering, getting out here and mentoring young people as part of your business. That is a simple way to make a social impact in your for-profit business. You can get engaged in so many things. You can bring different kinds of products into your business that you've already got that might be kind of cause related. You can integrate working with a charity in your business. One of the things that I've always told folks that makes sense to do is, if you have a cause you're really passionate about, find a charity that already speaks to that cause that you feel good about, and just integrate it into your marketing and say, you know what? Whenever you make a purchase from our company, we're making a donation to help stop domestic violence. Something of that nature can also help businesses be able to develop a personal brand, a unique brand that kind of starts to set you apart from other people. And it will resonate with others who care about the same cause.
Well, that's a good way of looking at it. Is it easy to, go to corporations and things like that to get them to sponsor you, or have you tried that?
That's something I'm still in the early stages of myself, because we're just in the process of launching a lot of the programs that we've been prototyping for a number of years. We really weren't ready for the corporate sponsor kind of route, but we are looking for them now. Right now, we're looking for trades type sponsors for our pre-apprenticeship program. We're looking for anybody who just has a heart for helping to create change makers in the world. Even, there's a whole lot of things. And what's really cool about us being full-time RVers, I can decorate my RV as a rolling billboard for the sponsors. So we are totally open to that idea as well. So hopefully as we go along, I've been making a list of potential sponsors as I'm out here looking at things and just saying, all right, here's some of the places we need to approach, and just let them know what we're doing and how we can help promote and advertise them.
Maybe our guests need to know a little bit about what you meant about the comment about being an RVer. You want to just share what you're doing?
Certainly. 3 years ago, actually just about 3 years ago this month, my husband and I made a decision that we wanted to be mobile, because again, everything we're about is helping to lift up our communities, to help create more health, wealth, and peace in our communities all across the country, all across North America, quite honestly. And we just knew that it would be easier to do that for us if we could just go to a location where people were interested in what we're doing, be able to park there, and not have to keep looking over your shoulder, wondering what in the world is going on back at home. So, we do not have a permanent address other than a mailbox in Florida. And we are full-time in the RV, and we absolutely love it. This winter has been adorable being here in the Tampa Bay area. The weather has been perfect. Last summer, we spent the whole summer parked on the side of a mountain in North Georgia, and that was amazing too. So, we get to combine on the weekends. We try to get out and hike and walk and do some things in the local area so we can have a little bit of fun. But trust me, it is not an endless vacation. We are working ourselves silly most of the time.
So if anybody would like to get a hold of you and to maybe utilize some of your services, how would they do that?
Well, let's see. We do have a website that is just launching right now, so it's still being tweaked. But if people are curious to see more about what we're doing and how we're doing it, it's called dothechange.us. And that is where we're starting to put up pages for every state and provinces in Canada, where we have business owners who are honest, ethical business owners who want to be part of helping to lift up our communities in multiple ways. So we have that. But we also have a little gift if anybody's interested in just exploring more about this idea of maybe even considering creating your own problem-solving team that could help in, with education, that could help with business or your community. And people can access that by just going to getmyguide.info. And it's kind of a fast start guide to give you some of the beginning steps on how to go about setting up your own problem solving team. Again, that's getmyguide.info.
Okay, so getmyguide.info or
dothechange.us.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so if you're interested in getting a hold of Sheyenne, that's how you're going to get a hold of her. Thank you so much for joining us today on Your Inside Power. This is Patricia Stepler, and I hope to see you next week when Krista is going to join us, and she is going to talk about how she used her inside powers to become a skier, even though she is blind. So join us again next week, next Friday at 2 o'clock Eastern time for Your Inside Power.